right, we're right at 7 o'clock, so I'll call tonight's meeting to order. And Karen, can we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Husnick.
Here.
Councilmember Valento.
Here.
Councilmember Erickson.
Here.
Councilmember Roberts.
Here.
And Mayor Bain.
Here, I'd like to invite everyone to rise and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Council, we have an agenda before you this evening. I will entertain a motion to approve or any changes.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Okay.
A motion and a second. All those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose? And our agenda is approved. Our first item this evening, we have the pleasure of getting a legislative update from Senator Housley and Representative Anderson. And we're so glad you're here. Happy to hear an update. And the floor is yours.
Thanks so much, Mayor and council members. I'm Senator Karen Housley. I'm serving in my 4th term in the Minnesota Senate. I sat on the Jobs Committee, the Commerce Committee, and the Housing Committee. And then I was also the Republican lead on the Bonding Committee. We'll get into the bonding later, but it was a different session for us, being that the Democrat Party had complete control of the House, the Senate, and the governorship. So there wasn't a lot we could get done that was our priority, and we were kind of constantly battling, just fighting for what we thought was right and what was right for each of our districts. But in the end, we still have a lot of these new laws that were passed, and there was a lot of them, and this was the fastest session in my 11 years at the Capitol of pushing a lot of policies that kind of were new, and pushing them through all of the committees, and we were just trying to slow everything down, but almost all of them got passed. So we've got legalized marijuana, we've got paid family leave, sick and safe time. There's a lot of things that we still have to see how it all pans out because it went so fast, so a lot of these big policy changes didn't get proper vetting, we felt, because it went so fast. But in the end, again, being the chair of the bonding committee, or the Republican lead of the bonding committee, we were so happy that we were able to bring back some funding and bring some resources here in our district, Forest Lake and Stillwater and Hugo. So I'll have Patty go into what we actually, and you guys already know, but maybe the people watching don't know what we got for Forest Lake.
Good opportunity to say it again.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor, and council members. I'm Patty Anderson. I'm in my actual first term as a legislator representing Forest Lake, Hugo, kind of down south, Delwood, into Mahtomedi and Willany. It was, as Senator Housley said, it was quite a very fast-paced session. Many changes, which went into effect July 1, but I think will be very noticeable later in the year. For us in the minority party, you know, it was frustrating, but you know, it is what it is, right? So we lost, so that's how it happens. So, but we were, thanks to a lot of it was Senator Housley as the Republican lead on the bonding committee. She was able to really kind of make sure that we got our things that we needed, and we got things for Forest Lake. Forest Lake has a lot of needs. The mayor and council and the city administrator gave us a list and said, hey, if you can help, if you can do any of these things, please do. And so we were happy to really push and hold out until the end to make sure that we got things for our district. The Eureka Avenue, that's a huge project, and I understand you'll be starting that tonight, voting on some of that tonight. I think what?
$4.5 million.
$4.5 million, which is significant. The wetland and the water issue and the Hugo Forest Lake border, which I think will start to open up development there. That was over
5.7.
5.7. See, she knows. And we were able to help the funding is in place now, I think, for the vet memorial, which is amazing. I hope that you've seen all the photos. I know this park department's heavily involved in that, and that's very, very exciting. And it's going to be just an iconic thing in the center, you know, over by the beach. So just, it's going to be great. And am I missing anything?
No, I think that's good. I want to thank you, Madam Mayor, in the, as Patty said, or Representative Anderson said, we held out through most of the session because that's the one thing that we did have was the Democrat Party needed to get 2/3 of the Republicans to also vote for the bonding bill, or 2/3 of the total chamber to vote. So they needed Republican votes. So we really, really held out to the very, very end. So we didn't know how much money we were going to be allotted to the Republicans' House and Senate, and then Democrat House and Senate until the very end. So I want to thank you so much for answering every single late night text that I gave you. People need to know she was up till 2 in the morning one night, and I'm texting her, okay, so Eureka Avenue, is this one of the priorities? How much money? Is this okay if we do this? And you were so responsive and gracious. So
Happy to do it.
thank you so much, because a lot of this wouldn't have happened if you didn't answer quickly. If you didn't answer quickly, we were moving on. No, I wouldn't do that.
Well, and
But,
it's, and it's fun when the response back was, we got all 3, so that's good. But
Yeah,
yes.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
thank you.
yeah, so thank you very, very much. And thank you all for your support through the session, because it was difficult. And so it's nice when we do get emails and phone calls from those of you that are backing us up to continue the fight. And we will continue to, and hopefully we can keep those taxes low. It was
Yeah.
a little disappointing this year, but we're gonna keep fighting for it.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
The-
thank you.
There's immediate impact to our 10-year plan. Eureka Avenue has sped up in priority and was a place of, having $4.5 million of a project that needs to be done right away, has impact to other streets that also have priority and needs. And so for us to be able to fill that hole quickly was helpful. And then the stormwater project to the south, to the Hugo border, really does help set the stage for development. But it's something that without some additional assistance, we weren't going to be able to just do it ourselves. It's on paper the perfect project that this is the way development should happen, but funding it is challenging. So having that assistance, and we've got some partnership now with the school district as well, with some property that they are looking at, that really will help escalate that. And that just helps the entire community. So much appreciated. And then the Veterans Memorial Park is just fabulous, and
Yeah.
also went from being a project that was looking for funding, and we've been wanting to do it for many, many years. So now to have that funded is really just a nice icing and cherry on top. So many, many thanks. So
Yeah.
really appreciate all of your hard work.
Madam Mayor, I just wanted to thank, on the Veterans Project, Ron Miller. He did a lot of work and
Yeah.
testified in front of the Legacy Committee and the Bonding Committee, and really put a lot of work into that, and was diligent about getting there when we needed him at the last second. So wanted to give him a shout out. I don't think he's here, but
100%.
yeah, so thank you, and thanks, Mr. Miller.
Very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And also, frankly, Representative Detmer,
Oh, yeah,
texting
also-
from Florida.
Also set
Making-
the stage very well.
That's right.
Yeah,
Can't forget Bob.
yeah, he was in there too. I'm like, Bob, aren't you golfing?
Yeah.
No.
Right.
And he was actually watching us on cable, which is, yeah.
He needs a life. He needs a life.
So, yeah.
Retired, but not fully.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. So-
Council, any questions? Any questions for Representative or Senator today? All right. Thank you. We
Yeah.
look forward to
Thank
continue
you.
conversations in the fall, kind of set the stage for next year. There's always more, right? But it's great to really just take a pause and celebrate some of the accomplishments, so we really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
See you guys.
All right, our next item this evening is open forum, and open forum is any interested party's opportunity to address council on any topic of their choosing. We do have an item, the natural gas appeal hearing does have a public portion, so if you are here to speak on that topic, you are welcome to speak now at open forum, or if you want to wait until we are on that agenda item, you are welcome to speak at that point. And signed up for open forum this evening, we have Gary Lee from Forest Lake Lions. Gary, the podium is yours.
Mayor and council, I almost feel I should have a blonde wig on to get some attention here, but maybe not. I'm Gary Lee, and I also mumbled my address because it's Columbus,
We
Minnesota.
allow it. We
But
allow
I was lucky enough to be elected to be president of the Forest Lake Lions for the next year. And one of my goals is to make sure that we know the needs of Forest Lake and that we can address those things that affect the Forest Lake residents. If you look at the brochure that I gave you, there's approximately 50 a listing of about 50 places where primarily those are places that we give money. But we don't always know that those places are affecting Forest Lake residents as much as we'd like to. So what I would ask you is work with me on what I'll call an informal survey of needs that Forest Lake residents may have. You may know of a neighbor that is an old couple that can't mow their lawn or they can't shovel. You know, we're looking for all kinds of projects that are either labor intensive or money, either way. But I'd like to have some suggestions from you guys as to see what kinds of things, and the brochure that you have kind of outlines most of the things that we do currently. But we don't want to be missing the local residents. And I guess that's my hot button for the year, that we want to make sure that either the money that we give or the work that we do is for local residents. So any help that you would give us, and my email address, or the Lions email address is at the bottom, and my phone number is there. Either call or email me with suggestions that you may have, and some of the things we may already be doing, but don't take that chance that we already know what you're thinking. And anyone in the audience as well, if you have know of needs that are not being met, either in the school district, the residents of the city, or even retirement homes or whatever. So we'd welcome your suggestions. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Is there anybody else that would like to speak during open forum this evening? All right, hearing none, we'll bring the agenda back to council. And council, for your consideration is our consent agenda items 7A through 7G, and open to a motion or any changes.
I'll make a motion that we approve the consent agenda A through G.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor signal by saying aye. Aye. Oppose, and our consent agenda is approved. All right, our first item this evening is an item that was tabled at our last meeting, which is the Northern Natural Gas Appellant hearing. And Abby/Amanda, do you want to maybe give an update on from where we were when we last had this an agenda item, and just kind of kick us off for the evening?
Yeah, thank you, Your Honor, Council. So since the last City Council meeting, there has been some additional information and legal authority that has been uncovered. Specifically, there were some questions at the last meeting about the 60-day clock, which is a function of Minnesota statute, specifically Minnesota Statute 1599. The 60-day clock for the Northern Gas conditional use permit expired on May 22nd. So according to the state statute and then related case law that interpreted the statute, the reality is that council no longer has the authority to issue any sort of decision on the CUP. It's considered approved automatically as a function of the law, basically. It's called operation under the law. In the memo that I provided for you for this council meeting, I do advise that council take a series of actions. The first one is to make a motion to find that the two appeals that are challenging the CUP are moot in accordance with Minnesota Statute 1599 and the related case law, which is Moreno v. City of Minneapolis. A second motion to find that the Northern Natural Gas CUP is approved by operation of law. But then I would also ask that you still allow the appellants the opportunity to present their evidence and provide Northern Natural Gas with the opportunity to respond. And if you choose to open it up to the public, any public comment that would be also onto the record. and then make a non-binding finding of either support or that the planning commission correctly applied the legal criteria, or finding that the planning commission incorrectly applied the legal criteria. The reason for that is to provide the appellants with their due process rights, which is to be heard on this issue. I can take additional questions. I know this is a little clunky and awkward, and obviously, you know, I apologize for that. Secondarily, I don't want to forget, I would also recommend, this isn't a motion item, but it could be that, given the situation, that we refund the appellants their money that they paid for their appeals, because we can't rule technically on them. It doesn't seem fair for them to have paid the money. So that would be something that you could also make a motion or direct staff to refund their payments. I'm available for questions. I know, like I said, I know this is a little bit clunky, so if there's any questions, I'm available for questions from you, or if the applicant, and they come up and they need some clarity as well.
One question on your last point there. Just want to confirm there's no bill back agreement in place where there'd be some legal fees brought back to them on a lot of these appeals that typically happens?
Correct. There, Your Honor, Councilmember Roberts, no, there is no bill from my time or staff time to the appellants.
Any other questions kind of around process-wise? Otherwise, I think we would proceed as Amanda recommended, which would be first consideration of a motion related to the two appeals. But before we jump into that, I just want to make sure we're kind of clear on process. And ultimately tonight, that there will be an opportunity for the appellant to be held. I do think it's important, kind of given the timing and the unfortunateness of that there wasn't an extension filed, that the appeal fees be, I think it's fair that those appeal fees be refunded. And so I've just kind of noted here on our list, under like number 2, I'll just add an additional item to refund those appeal fees. But I also do think that it is important that, you know, we aren't the only governing body that is, that this project impacts. And so I think it's important that even though the appeal might be mute from a legal perspective, that it is allowed to be like heard on the record, that there is kind of both sides heard on the record. And so I think, again, although technically moot, I think there is still a good opportunity to at least hear the appeal, and for council to weigh in on the decision that was made by the Planning Commission, because that also has consequence. So with that, to kind of get us kicked off, I would, I'm just going to kind of follow through the order that Amanda had laid out for us. So I would move that the two appeals challenging the approval of Northern Natural Gas, the CUP, are moot and in accordance with Minnesota statute section 1599 and Moreno versus the city of Forest Lake. Again, so I would move that council would find in favor of those two appeals.
I'll second. Sorry,
I'll second.
I'll second. Go ahead.
Motion, second.
One of you can second it.
All right, any discussion on this particular point? We'll have opportunity for discussion as we go through these. All right, all those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Oppose? All right, motion carries. And then the second follow-up to that would be a motion to find that the Northern Natural Gas has a CUP approval by operation of law under the requirements of Minnesota statute section 1599 and Moreno versus the city of Minneapolis. Is there a second on that motion?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion on this point? Hearing none, all those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Motion carries. The third is the addition. I would move to instruct staff to refund the appeal fees for the two appellants that filed their appeal. Is there a second to refund the appeal fee? I believe that fee was $500. Is that correct?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion on the refunding that fee? Hearing none, all those in favor signal by saying aye. Aye. Oppose? Motion carries. All right, now an opportunity for the appellants to present your evidence. Just like we had said last time, this opportunity is this time is for those for the appellants. We do have all of your materials. The materials were presented to us in your last packet. We came to our last meeting kind of prepared to hear. So you don't need to, kind of verbatim state everything that's in the packet, but we're happy to hear any information that you would like us to hear. The floor is yours. And then we will give, if there's a representative from Northern Natural Gas, we'll give them an opportunity to respond. And then we'll open it up for just a quick public hearing for anyone from the public that may wish to also speak. Welcome.
Hi, thank you
Could I
all for
have you
gathering.
Could I have you start with your name just for the record?
It's Emily Jelfs.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for all gathering for no reason. I've come here this evening to let you all know how disappointed I am. I'd like to start off by sharing how deceitful Abby Jo Whitman is. Mara Bain, her behavior and her competency falls back onto you. On May 10th, Abby Jo Whitman disclosed to the room the process of the appeal, including the deadline and that there would be a fee. By May 16th and May 17th, both appeals were in. By May 22nd, our appeals and $500 were moot. I found this out on July 7th via email from Abby Jo Whitman. Abby Jo Whitman misled the public into thinking an authentic appeal process was possible. On May 17th, when I went to deliver my appeal per the deadline and instruction given by Abby Jo Whitman, she stated I didn't have to pay. I actually had to ask 4 times if that was correct. Abby insisted I did not have to pay. Later that day at 1:59 p.m., she's supposedly calling me at work, leaving me voicemails and emails asking I pay the fee that she said I did not have to pay. Abby's words were, quote, "I'm so sorry for my error and conflicting information. Please call if you would like to discuss." Abby Jo Whitman wrongfully took $500, knowing that the deadline was May 22nd. Abby Jo Whitman has lied about the appeal process, lied about the due dates and fees, and now has lied about providing me notes and materials. A majority of you gathered on June 1st at 3:30 p.m., 15 days after both appeals, had already drawn the attention of your lawyer. Based on, quote, members who may be present at that meeting, Abby Jo Whitman was not listed. Now I understand you all can't say much about that. I understand why you all did not have anything to say on June 26th and granted a postponement for this evening. Not only was the public misled by Abby Jo Whitman, but you all were too. You were fed lies. Not only has the city fraudulently taken $500 from us, which would have interest as well, because you guys, by my understanding, are not a bank, but you have also taken our dream home where we were going to start our family. You've taken away our safety, our life savings, and due process with the appeals. When something is taken, it's to be expected to be paid for. Mara Bain, your city board, and your planning commission has allowed this to happen. You were all at fault. I'd like you all to imagine yourselves and your family enduring this tragedy. For the last several months, I've had to try and fight for my rights, my neighbors' rights. My appeal showed the blast radius of this valve, the potential contamination that could wreak and ruin several surrounding homes and wildlife. It stated our inability to flee if there were ever an explosion or mishandling, such as the ones disclosed in our appeals under the watch of Northern Natural Gas. Ultimately, it showed that even though I'm new to the community, I cared for my neighbors, I cared for the land and resources that draw others to this city. Does this mishap fit the city's slogan, as good as it sounds, or is it just the pure corruption you've all had to play in?
Hello, City Council members of Forest Lake. My name is Richard Jelfs of 18150 July Ave North. Kind of got a little bit of start here. You guys got ahead of me. We referenced the July 10th memo already relating to Minnesota statute 15.99 requires government agencies to make zoning related decisions within 60 days of a completed application. The 60-day rule. The government agency can extend this timeline 120 days in written notice. Unfortunately, the city of Forest Lake failed to make decision within their time frame. They also failed to notify Northern Natural Gas of the extension needed that took place while they were performing due process. So I find that that's an issue that we're going to have to settle sooner or later. Page 2 of said memo states, right here, second paragraph, after May 22nd, 2023, the council lacks the authority to review the planning commission's approval. So again, we've already touched base on this, it's moot. Moot being defined as having little or no relevant application. Well, I've emailed you guys about this. I've shown you the verification that the city was in receipt within our 60-day time frame. We were successfully completed, fees paid. I have to laugh if you think that sending our $500 back is going to appease us. We will be pursuing you guys in court for other things. But basically, yeah, you guys have no authority here. What's done is done. It's approved. So we'll leave that memo there. Again, Emily's already touched on this. The notice of the special meeting. Forest Lake City Center, the Castlewood Golf Course, Thursday, June 1st at 3:30 p.m. This is to serve as notice of a special meeting to be held at the Castlewood Golf Course Clubhouse, June 1st, 2023, 3:30 p.m., and a possible quorum of the Forest Lake City Council, Economic Development Authority, and Planning Commission. These groups may participate in discussion, but will not act in capacity to make decisions. Sounds to me like Planning Commission and the City Council are the people who make the decisions around here, and they all met off the record on June 1st. I would be hard pressed to believe it didn't involve discussion and debate about my appeal. There's no minutes posted on this, but it will be a topic of inquiry in a courtroom. Let's go on to the June 26th memo. Okay, bottom of page 1, regarding the CUP request. The CUP required applies only to the portion of the pipeline that is in the floodway overlay district. Northern does not require any planning or zoning approvals for the areas of the pipeline that are outside of the floodway overlay district, including the section of pipe that comes out of the ground as part of the valve setting. The valve setting itself does not require city approvals. So basically, you guys have said it from the get-go, your jurisdiction is limited to this little bubble of the directional boring under the lake. I guess my biggest contention and where you guys and I diverge is that it was said on May 10th, prior to the Planning Commission making their decision, that approval of the CUP was an exclusive requirement for the infrastructure to be placed at this location. Without the approval, the gas station or the pipeline, the valve setting, couldn't be placed here. I'll go on to say that infrastructure we're talking about houses compressed natural explosive materials, and the location is in the middle of 7 houses, multiple people. We're talking 20 souls plus that are directly affected by this. It's not just, you guys did not just vote to bore under the lake. You voted to give access to Northern Natural Gas on this corner that's in the middle of houses and houses and houses. Here's a picture of it. You can find this online. I'm sure you've seen it. We're looking at valve location here, 180th Street, July. Adam and Denise Thule. There's another house. Here's my house. We've got Gary, Byron, and the Schmiejas. They're a classy bunch. I guess I'll start by just reading my opening paragraph here that was page 1 of my appeal. For the Planning Commission to allow Northern Natural Gas access by way of adoption of this resolution and passing of the conditional use permit through protected wetlands, allowing for Northern Natural Gas to install additional pipeline capacity to include above-ground valve station at July Ave North and 180th Street, knowing full well the potential for life-threatening consequences to 7 established families living at this location and relative proximity to a dangerous intersection, the shooting off of fireworks by residents at the subject property, and involving infrastructure that is inherently subject to mechanical failures, human error, and acts of God, which introduces additional and greater dangers to the community that cannot be fully mitigated away, no matter how many inspections, tests, sensors, maintenance, or other means of safeguards are in place. To uphold the planning commission's approval of this conditional use permit, knowing full well the consequences of said decisions, and without said objection, is negligence. Luckily, you guys don't have to vote on it. You missed the window, either by accident or by design. Let's see here. Again, I just want to reiterate that my case against your case is inherently going to involve the fact that you weren't just voting and putting your blinders on to the fact you're going to the lake. You're going to the lake, or you allowed them to go into the lake, to the notion that the infrastructure would be put at this location. That was known, and obviously there's consequences to putting life-threatening infrastructure in the middle of homes. You can't do that, or at least you can, but you shouldn't. All right. Couple things. Our last meeting, June 26th, you guys told us that, we should just come up here and give you a couple bullet points. Don't need to go through everything. Well, yeah, there's no way that I can give you a couple summary points of my 92 pages submitted and convey to you the information that rightfully needs to be considered. Here's my attempt. Here's my couple bullet points as to the matter of fact here. Northern Natural Gas is already approved to add their 1 mile loop, 30-inch diameter pipeline operating at 1,000 maximum operable pressure. With that comes a 660-foot blast radius. This valve station will tie into 2 existing pipelines that are of 20-inch diameter. So a 650-foot blast radius, also known as an incineration zone, is a very conservative number. In my packet, which you've probably referenced, are 7 residences within the 650-foot mark that are going to be demolished, incinerated, and whose lives will be lost if there is ever an accident to come. Do accidents happen? Well, 286 serious natural gas explosions occur per year. These are the type of explosions that cause property damage, severe injury, or loss of life. Well, not Northern Natural Gas Pipeline, right? Oh, well, 2021 article. Ellsworth County, Kansas. A pipeline owned and operated by Northern Natural Gas exploded. Luckily, it was in a field and no one was hurt. Check back a year prior. We're looking at 2020. Explosion. Here this time, we are in Nebraska. Again, in a field where these things should be located. Because this bomb here, that's what's going to happen if there's ever a mishap. And that could be at the hands of Northern Natural Gas by mistake, or that could be of natural causes, out of their control. It doesn't negate the fact that this equipment has the capacity to create devastation for properties and lives, and you're allowing it to be put in the middle of residential homes. Obviously, I submitted 22 exhibits with my submission. Now, do I think this thing would ever explode? Probably not, but could it? It's made to hold compressed flammable gas. Compressed flammable materials, that's how you make a bomb. And although this is regulated and has some control measures, there's no 100% guarantee that those will always work. So, do I think it's going to explode? No, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt, even though I know their pipelines explode. I've got documented evidence of it. But it could. And with the fact that not only could it explode, it's not like a bomb-making factory where the workers will go home at 5 o'clock. For the lifetime of the operation of this equipment, while there is compressed natural gas inside of it, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, the potential for an explosion is there. You can't get rid of it. So I guess I would just say that until I know for a fact that many people have been compensated, or there are already promises to compensate healthfully many of the neighbors in the neighborhood in relation to this, I would say that until the day Northern Natural Gas comes knocking on my door and is looking to compensate me for the loss of safety that I'm gonna experience every day, or every moment, I should say, while I occupy my own residence, until they come and try and right that wrong, I will be pursuing legal matters against them and the city of Forest Lake. In closing, I realize that this is all for nothing. You guys had a window of opportunity, 6 days expiring after my legal appeal submission, and you tell me today that obviously you made a mistake and I'll get my 500 or my 250 back. Well, I mean, I don't know if that is really gonna work out here. I just know that there's not a chance in on God's green earth that if we were talking about this adjacent to your property, that you would be anywhere near where you are. It's absurd that you guys would not do this to your friends or family, but you're willing to do it to us. So I guess as an ending statement, your further communications will come from my attorney. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I'm happy to open up to anybody from the public that would like to speak. Actually, before we open to the public, is there a representative from Northern Natural Gas here to speak this evening?
I'm
Well-
Stephen Martinez with Northern Natural Gas. We operate at 1120 Center Point Drive in Mendota Heights, Minnesota.
Welcome.
I just have a few things in regards to that. I did just want to mention that irregardless of whatever decisions would have been made by the Planning Commission and the City Council, Northern Natural Gas is actually regulated underneath the Natural Gas Act, which is 15 U.S.C. 17. In addition to that, we are regulated by PHMSA under the 1968 amendment for natural gas. And in regards to that, regardless of any decisions that you may have made, we would have had preemption to those in regards to the acts that were available. We won't comment on any of the statements that were made here tonight, but I just want to let you aware of that information.
Understood. And are those two separate bodies? Could you say those one more time, just what the?
Yeah, so
and are they
we're regulated.
federal- Are they federal bodies?
They are, correct. So we're regulated by FERC, which is the Federal Regulatory Energy Commission, and that's under the Natural Gas Act of 15 U.S.C. and 717, and then also the U.S. Congress granted exclusive federal authority to regulate the safety and operation of Northern's interstate natural gas facilities and jurisdiction of the Pipeline for Hazardous Materials and Safety Administration, which is called PHMSA, pursuant to the Natural Gas Pipeline Safety Act of 1968. That was amended, and I also supplied this over to the city with the information directly related that you could request if you need additional clarification on it.
Understood. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. With that, I'm happy to open the podium to anybody from the public that would like to speak. And if you could, as you come forward, just state your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Bruce Bain. I'm at 10151 180th Street, Hugo. I was invited here by members of Northern Methane. I find nothing natural about that combination. Methane is very lethal. It is one of the major contributors to greenhouse gases. So you understand, in my own particular house, how am I going to behave if I don't consume? So what do I have? I have an air-to-air heat pump that only consumes 580 gallons of propane per year. I plan to replace that when it goes out with a ground geothermal heating system. I have electric water heaters also supported by an outside air-to-air heat pump. I have electric water cables. I have the electric microwave. I have the electric stove. And I have a conduction top. I do not consume gas. So you've heard an impassioned appeal by two people who were completely sandbagged. And I know that there's anger inside of that. So what's my anger? My anger is that I don't understand the tremendous difference between what Abby said, Abby, right? What Abby said to me when I first met her in April, when she said, I just received the filings from Steve Martinez in the third week of March. And I didn't get it until April 4th. The letter was dated March 31st. So the first question I have to you that's posed as something you should do is find out how long did the planning department know that that was what those people were trying to do. You may not remember that in my letter to you is that Steve Martinez went from house to house securing property rights and paying money. You have two members right there who did receive money for that to be there. Steve Martinez did represent that this is to be a valving station. On the other evening, when he was quite annoyed at me, I believe the language was that I'm aggressive. I'm always aggressive in the front of somebody that is duplicitous. And that at that time, he told me that it was because a customer wanted it there. And that eventually this big 30-inch pipe is going to maybe go down the road and maybe it's going to go away. So there are stories being told here that you don't know. And you didn't have the time to respond. I didn't have the time to respond. I looked into the government requirements, as Mr. Martinez suggested, and I discovered that even if I went and did all of those things with FERC, I would not have enough time to do it to stop this abomination. Now, my personal thing is, well, is it going to blow me up? No. Is it on my property? No. So I should walk away from it? No. We've just had 3 days in the last 2 weeks that are the world's record for heat. Methane is a contributor for that. And so you know, this is not natural gas. It must be 75%. They can tell you their exact composition. And that although it's not in your jurisdiction, considerable construction has been going on inside of the pumping station down in the May Township on the side of 180th Street. So there's a plan to put a whole lot of methane in here. And I think it would be reasonable for the council to think, how can we incentivize people to consider to use less? Because greenhouse gas, boy, it's coming. I look at this row, I look at most of you up here, and maybe with the exception of one man, I'm an old person. I won't be here for the cooking, but you will. The question is, are you going to be cooking with electricity? Or are you going to be cooking from the gas in the air? And I really think that you should consider the information that she had and the date she had it and when it went out to the neighborhood. And when he was supposed to send it, he told me that, because I said, well, wait a minute, you sent me this letter. I didn't respond right away. And then you sent out somebody knocking on the door, wanted to have permission. When they decided to go across the street, never heard from him. I was curious, what's going on? I went to one of my other neighbors and found out, oh, he's been going up and down making deals, putting money in checks, and none of you had the opportunity to consider or even review it at the time that he's out there spending money. That's duplicitous, Steve. You can tell that I'm placing a lot of blame on one person. He's the right-of-way agent. My perception is, sounds like it's the right-of-way, my way, right-of-way agent. But what I want you to look at is a conversation with your planning department to find out when they received it. And if in fact they had received it, why was it that I didn't get it until April 4th? Because even at April 4th, the amount of time and energy to prepare a response that you could review to make an intelligent decision was out of the window. Thank you very much.
Open forum is still open. Is there anyone else that would like to speak on this topic? You could state your name and address for the record, please.
Hi, my name's Dean Lopez, and I live on 166 180th Street North, where they're going through on the lake. what I got to say, he's talking about how they, pay money for easements and all that. But here's another thing they don't tell you about their deceptiveness. Because after they paid for the easement to go through my property, they came back later on saying, oh, Dean, we got some trees we got to cut down. And on the north edge of my property, there's a line of trees. And they said, yeah, it's going to cost $25,000 plus to cut them down. And I told them, well, that's kind of a lot to be cutting them trees. I could have cut them for $5. And then we got a company out there that's going to do it already, and we got to check in your name so you could pay them to do it, because we can't change something on here right now because we had all the approval. Now we can't do this, so we got to do it in your name. Well, I thought they're talking about the trees that they're cutting on my property. In reality, they only cut it three trees on my property. They made a hell of a mess in my field where they cut the neighbor's trees, where I probably got to go over there and pick up all the branches out, because if I plow or use any of my equipment, it's going to wreck my equipment. And then they wrote that form of check like they gave me the money, so I had to report it on my taxes as income that I got from them. In reality, it was for them getting trees cut that they did not get approval for telling you what the scope of their work, what they're going to have to do. So see, they're kind of deceiving everybody when they say they do stuff, because they're talking about the trees starting from their station all the way over across the lake. And they made it sound like they're going to be cutting my trees. That's why I asked them, $25,000 to cut these trees, that's ridiculous. But then to find out that they're cutting the tree lines for the whole way, and they're saying that they couldn't do something because they didn't have approval or what. But see, they're trying to deceive everybody and go around it in another boat, just another step, another way around it. And that's what I'm saying, when they are doing stuff, it's not always like they say. And I laid a lot of pipeline. I went through swamps and everything with gas lines and all that. And I just got a question. And every time they lay a pipeline, because I've been there, been two pipelines through my property now. And this is going to be the third. You got this one here, then they want another 75 feet, easement on each side, then another 75 feet. And I'm just kind of wondering, why don't you just bore deeper underneath the other two that they have? And I know they can do that, because I worked with companies that have done that, where, because now where they're going to my neighbor's place, they're going to the lake, they're taking up a couple acres of land that's going to be completely useless because you got pipe underneath there. I'm just wondering, why don't they just bore underneath the line where they got? If they say they got their pipe 6 feet down, or 12 feet down underneath it, and run the same line. Because I've seen that done through swamps where we bored through it and they get all the machinery on the cables and all that, and we pull that pipe right on through swamps and all that, where they gotta, bore underground and all that. And I'm just wondering, why wasn't that an option? Why do they keep taking 75, needing 75 feet on this side of the pipe, 75, then they want the other pipe 75. Next thing you know, they got 300 feet of easement they keep taking up, and land is available right now. So I'm just trying to tell you, like on that tree thing, because they said they couldn't basically do it legally. So they come around, well, Dean, we got to cut some trees on your property. 3 trees, $25,000, they're saying. I thought they're going to go on the north side of my line and cut all my trees down to get all their equipment. And I was thinking, yeah, they can just go through my field. But no, that wasn't the case. They started from their station all the way to every tree that they had to cut down. And you want to talk about being deceitful, that's what they are. They don't really tell you exactly what they're going to do. They'll try to bend around it, twist around it. So I'm just telling you how they do stuff that I found out, and that really pissed me off. I thought they were taking my trees down, and they didn't mention my neighbor's tree, my neighbor's tree, or the whole trees in everybody's line. and basically have me put that money down as income towards me. So, I think all you guys will be mad and say, hey, it's gonna be $25,000 to cut these trees. We got the company, which they got the company already there to bid to do it. Yeah, we're just gonna write you out a check here, blah, blah, you put in your bank and just write them out a check for $25,000, you know? They never said it was gonna be income towards me, but they say, well, we can't really do it legally because we didn't include this in the deal that we were doing when whoever they give all the information to. So, I mean, if deceitfulness comes into play here, what else are they not telling everybody? And I'm just kind of pissed off at that because my tax man, told me, the way they did it, they paid you $25,000. I go, no, they didn't. That was for the trees. The way they write it up, so like they paid me like that was income they gave me, In reality, it was for work that they had to do and they couldn't get approval for. Let them explain it to you guys. You got somebody here? Let them explain it to you and see what they have to say now. Because I got the name of the place that cut the trees, and I tell you right now, not one of them ever talked to me, so I did not go in and slit this bid. They did. And why it wasn't included in the plans? I don't know, but it was something that they couldn't do, in their own name. They had to go outside to do it. And you may wonder how many more times they got to go outside to do stuff because they forget stuff, things pop up. So I'm just letting you know, there's things, like I said, why don't they dig underneath the other pipes?
Your point's well made. Thank you.
Okay.
Is there anybody else that would like to speak on this topic? All right, we appreciate everybody being here this evening. Let's bring conversation back to council. Council before us is consideration. Back to my notes here. So as council considers kind of the actions of the Planning Commission and either upholds the actions of the Planning Commission or overturns or would have a vote of non-confidence of the vote of the Planning Commission, as kind of we're considering this next phase of the question, Abby, could you just walk through again, just for clarity, the kind of the jurisdiction of the city of Forest Lake? There's been a number of concerns listed about valve location and a number of topics, but could you kind of clarify again what is within the city of Forest Lake's CUP jurisdictional authority? And then could you just walk through the criteria for the floodplain overlay? Just as I understand it, that is the criteria that the Planning Commission applied. And could you just highlight that for us as well?
Sure. Wasn't quite prepared. Don't have my notes right in front of me, but the city's jurisdiction for a conditional use permit is for, I think if I remember right, a utility line, or I don't remember the exact code statute through the floodplain. So it really is that jurisdiction just around and in between under the pond that's being proposed. As a reminder, conditional use permits in our code are uses that are allowed. We just have the right to add conditions to that approval. Generally speaking, there's a whole series of things in our code that the city can look at when they're considering use permits, but you want to see that what you're looking at there isn't, that it's compatible with the neighborhood, that there is not going to be any sort of negative impacts.
So close public comment if we could hold comment for council.
I can pull back up the Planning Commission's findings if you'd like to state those onto the record, but there's just a number of different factors to be considered.
I do think that would be helpful to hear what the Planning Commission's criteria was, because as I understand it, that's what we're being asked to affirm. I can appreciate this is an emotional topic. This is a challenging project. And it just feels that we have a fairly limited scope, and so it'd be helpful to just understand what were those criteria and just affirm again on the record what the Planning Commission's decision was, because that's what we're being asked to
I think they're on
affirm.
page 56 and 57 of our packet.
Yep, understood. And go ahead, Amanda.
Your Honor, Counsel, I was going to point out, if you look at starting on page 55 of your packet, it will say the legal framework for granting a conditional use permit. Just so we're clear, pipeline is explicitly listed as a conditional use in the floodway. And then there's kind of two sets of criteria for granting a conditional use permit in the floodway. There's our general criteria that we look at for every single conditional use. And then there's also a secondary set of criteria, and that's on page 56. That's specifically for conditional uses within the floodway overlay district. Many of those factors aren't triggered by this underground pipe that doesn't have anything above ground. Do you want me to read these?
I just wanted them noted on the record, and if council, if we're together kind of looking at what those are, and for the record, it is 56. And I guess I just bring that back because that is within our scope of questions. And when I look at that criteria, it is very specific to floodplain. It is very specific to water management. And I just wanted to make sure that, again, there's clarity of what was within our jurisdictional control and what is within other jurisdictional control. And there was some of the federal regulations mentioned. I also believe that there is some state regulation in play as well. Because again, I can appreciate the concerns of the property owners, but it's, I think, important to note that we have kind of a very limited scope of criteria that I just wanted to make sure that we were clear on. So I don't think we need to read it. And just wanted to make sure that it was on the record.
Madam Mayor, the Planning Commission was tasked to look at this COP. They weren't involved with determining where the valving station was going to be or anything like that. It was whether or not they could go underneath that wetland. That was it. And they did their work, I think, and they gave it due consideration, and they weren't involved with anything else beyond that. And so as far as the CUP is concerned, I think they got it right. And I think they did their due diligence on the whole thing. And when you look at all the criteria or the conditions that go with it, I don't know what else they could have done. They had none of the decision-making process about where the valving was going to go, the fencing, any of that kind of things. I think we should make it clear that with what the task that was given to them, they did their job.
I have to echo that. So when I look at the criteria that were provided, I haven't heard anything tonight that would say that that would tell me that the Planning Commission got it wrong. There's a lot of facts around the project that are challenging, and I hear the concerns that have been stated. But back to what is the potential impact on the floodplain, and should there be allowance to go through that floodplain based on this very limited criteria? Again, I'm not seeing something that would tell me that the Planning Commission got it wrong. I'm open to somebody changing my mind if somebody has some thoughts, but that's just my read based on what I've heard so far as well.
As far as the floodplain is concerned, I mean, they had guidance from the DNR. They had guidance from the state of Minnesota. They had guidance from our local ordinances. So I don't know what else they could have done. That's just my opinion.
Other points of discussion or questions for staff? Challenging. We've closed public comment, so we are back to discussion with council.
Just a point of clarification as it relates to item A, the impact of the proposed use on the health, safety, and general welfare of the occupants of the surrounding lands. Am I to understand that that is strictly, criteria for that is strictly the impact of boring under the lake? It has nothing to do beyond that?
Your Honor, Councilmember Erickson, yes, you are correct. It is just looking at the impact of the pipeline through the wetland or flood, whatever we're calling it, this lake area.
Any other questions, clarifications?
So, it's a tough situation. I get what the Planning Commission was under. I'm quite honestly surprised. I mean, every resident can't even put riprap on his lake shore without a bunch of permits, but yet the DNR is letting people bore under lakes was surprising to me, to be honest with you. I think that part, but I think the bigger concern for me right now is just, and I understand mistakes are made, but just the unclear how this process was. I mean, we were here 2 weeks ago thinking that we're going to have this conversation over, and then to find out the time had passed. It just doesn't seem right, and I can understand the frustration by the residents. I've been on the other side of these appeals for Planning Commission. It just doesn't feel right, and I don't know how, we need to be better than that.
Point well made. Other questions, comments?
I do, after having watched the Planning Commission meeting where this was approved, I do recall there was conversation with the Northern Gas about whether options there were. I mean, I'm not sure what's so appealing about this 1 mile loop through a highly concentrated residential area. Just one question I would ask is there not another 1 mile loop possible that moves that valve away from residents?
Fair question, and Amanda or Abby, has that been addressed?
Your Honor, Councilmember Erickson, so that's not within the scope of the CUP. The valve specifically is not something that we have the ability, the Planning Commission can't ask those questions because it's not related to the CUP. So while Northern Gas could offer you opinions about the valve, it isn't a relevant fact to the decision. Because I understand that the neighbors' fears are about the valve, but we have no authority, none whatsoever, over the valve. They got their rights via the easements to put it wherever they were putting it. That's a private agreement between two private parties. We can't, we don't have any authority to intervene there.
If I could just follow up on that, Commissioner Erickson, we also don't inherently have the authority to ask of, there's been reasonable alternatives, other designs. From a planning per zoning perspective, we look at an application, we weigh that application against our standards of conformity. And so that's the area that we're in, the Planning Commission was in, is this is the application that's before us. I understand the neighborhood was concerned about alternative designs. And I don't know if I mean, I think Amanda would agree, we don't have the legal authority to ask for alternative designs in our review processes.
Challenging one. So the question before council is being asked to either affirm the Planning Commission's decision to approve the CUP or to overturn the Planning Commission's decision to approve the CUP. I'm happy to entertain further discussion, or if anyone's ready for a motion.
Well, Madam Mayor, I make a motion that we affirm the decision made by the Planning Commission. They correctly applied the legal criteria for approving the floodplain CUP.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Just want to acknowledge the appellants, the points that were made, and you made your points very well. And I guess just an apology on the timeline and the dates, and getting the process was less than perfect, and there's some improvements that we need to make. Councilmember Roberts, I think, just said it well, if we need to do better, and acknowledged. And so I will vote to agree, and will vote to affirm the Planning Commission's decision, because again, based on just the very narrow scope, I think that they got it right. But I hear your frustration, and I hear your concerns, and we have some process improvements that we need to make. So I appreciate you being here tonight.
Call on the vote.
Any other discussion? All right, all those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Oppose? And motion carries. All right, we're gonna move on to our next agenda item, which is Resolution 710-2302, which is 7417 North Shore Trail Lot Line Adjustment. And Abby, I think you're walking us through this.
Ma'am, thank you, Mayor Bay and members of the council. About a year ago, the city was approached by representatives of 7417 North Shore Trail North regarding their inability to sell their property due to a title issue. Karen, could you please pull up my screen, please? At the time, a year ago, it was determined that the property, because of a series of issues, Actually was or the legal description defined with the property was well into the North Shore Trail right-of-way, or what would be the right-of-way. The challenge with that is that they wanted to sell the property, and North Shore Trail had since been redeveloped, and they needed to adjust that boundary to be able to sell the property. The property owner's representative worked with our legal team to talk about doing a deed, what we kind of swap or a lot line adjustment that would adjust that boundary of the property extending into the right-of-way or the area travel path of the road. Ooh, we got too far out here. Zoom out a little bit. The new lot line that's being proposed would clean up that, what would that be, easterly lot line. So the action tonight before you is essentially to approve, or consideration of approval of Resolution 07-10-2302, which would not only deed the landowner, I know this sounds a little funky, deed the landowner the land, which clears up all previous title issues, but also then accept the North Shore Trail right-of-way so that we would have that in fee title. So that one resolution actually takes those two actions, and staff would recommend the council move to approve Resolution 07-10-2302 tonight. Do you have any questions for me?
We received any feedback on why we shouldn't proceed? Any adjoining property concerns or any?
This isn't something that we have to notice for. I will, let's see if I've got this. Give me just a second here. I'm going to unplug. Let me pull up the property. So I'm thinking what has happened, and this sort of stuff is really common in old areas of communities. So this is an unplatted property that's bordered on two sides by platted neighborhoods. There's one other property in this area that's also affected. That hasn't come up at this time, that has become a title issue. It may never come up as a title issue, but with this one it is. We don't have to notify any neighborhood.
Abby, are you intending for us to see your screen?
I am not. I'm just trying to get to the property. If you give me just a second. I was closing some stuff that doesn't need to just be the, when I'm zooming around maps here. This isn't an action that requires any sort of public noticing. So 7417 is right on the edge of the Northern Lake Highlands plat and very close to the Cedar Park plat. Both of these plats are referenced in the legal description, making it even just more convoluted. The one thing that I'll note on the record is there's no formal findings for a request like this. Generally speaking, though, in the planning, zoning, land use world, we look to see if what we're looking to do is there's a public benefit for it. Well, cleaning up this title issue and acquiring the right-of-way through here, fee title at no cost to the taxpayers, there's public benefit there. And so I think even though we didn't poll the neighborhood, there is no adverse impact on the neighborhood or adjacent property owners. It's actually to their benefit, because then we own that road right-of-way outright now.
Understood. Council, any questions for Abby?
So there is public benefit by doing this.
There is public benefit. Again, the certificate of survey, this is the existing conditions where that property line is going right to the middle of the road right away. Under the new circumstance, that property line would be shored up to kind of line up with those adjacent property owners, and we would obtain that additional right of way. So there's, a general public benefit of obtaining the road right away at no additional cost to the city and the taxpayers, but also just public benefit in helping property owners clean up these title issues where we can with something as simple as a deed swap.
Any other questions?
And it was the property owner that kind of initiated this?
This was, yes. Property owner initiated, like I said, a little over a year ago. I think that they were having trouble selling the property with the title as it was.
So I'll make a motion. I've had property just down the road there, and are you ready for a motion?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll make the motion that we approve resolution 07-10-2302, 7417 North Shore Trail lot adjustment.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose, and motion carries. Brings us to our next item this evening, Resolution 710-2303, Declaration of Official Intent of the City of Forest Lake to reimburse certain expenditures from proceeds of bonds to be issued by the city. And Kevin, I believe you're walking us through this.
Yes, I am, Mayor and fellow council members. As mentioned earlier, with the legislative update, the city did receive state funding for Eureka Avenue. Due to not receiving many details on how the reimbursement process will work or how the funds will be distributed for this project, and with the planning phase and starting soon, so we can complete that construction in 2024, this resolution is authorizing if the city would need to issue bonds to pay for that project up front, and then get reimbursed, and then pay those bonds and reimburse themselves with those bonds, we would be able to claim those expenditures for those bonds. So when you issue bonds, you need to have a resolution, if you incur costs, which we would be, or will be shortly, and issue bonds at a future date. If this resolution is not passed, we are not able to claim those expenditures and reimburse ourselves through those bond proceeds. So this resolution is just more of a safeguard right now. It's not committing to saying that we are issuing bonds for Eureka Avenue or any other nature. It's just saying that if we do, we are able to reimburse ourselves for those costs.
Kevin, any questions for Kevin? Hearing none, open to a motion if anyone is ready.
I'll make a motion to approve Resolution 0710-2303, declaring the official intent of the City of Forest Lake, Minnesota to reimburse certain expenditures from the proceeds of bonds to be issued by the city.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose, and motion carries. Next item this evening is to authorize preparation of plans and specs for Eureka Avenue. And Ryan, I believe it's Ryan, right? Are you?
Yep.
Yeah,
Mayor,
thank
City
you.
Council, next agenda item we have for you tonight is the Eureka Avenue improvements. Formal request to authorize preparation of plans and specifications. The project does have a very tight timeline to deliver for a 2024 construction period. We did seek to see if this could be pushed out a year, but with MnDOT's project on 97 starting in 25, and then the two Washington County projects, it's just ideal that if the city can pull this off for 24 construction, and we're the agency that can do that versus the state and the county on their projects. We're coming tonight for this formal request. This morning we did have a meeting with MnDOT's project representatives on the project grants. So this project will be funded through this grant from the state general funds to be administered by MnDOT state aid through a 2023 local road improvement program, which is the same grant that we got for the south leg of the Headwaters Parkway and roundabout at Fenway. So very familiar with working this, and we've got it in other communities around here. And so moving forward, we're just, next step would be this step. We did pull two so I might confuse you with some stuff that I've said in the past. So like our traditional state aid projects, we can't request reimbursement until we award the project, right? So that might be some of the language you've heard if you've picked that up or digested that. In this case, we confirmed this morning, we pulled two separate state aid projects or requests. We'll have the design phase and the construction phase so we can get reimbursement as the project proceeds instead of waiting for a project award. That would be for the calendar here in May of 24. So Kevin was being proactive because we didn't know all the details that we found out this morning. But in the event, for some reason, if you still had to do that route, you would have that legal authority to do so. But in this case, hopefully, the city has cash flow for this project because we can submit the reimbursements during the construction period. That's when the costs will be significant monthly when we do contractors' requests for payments like we traditionally do on other projects. So that's kind of some of the details that are going into this project. In my memo, we should potentially strike out ADA accessible fishing pier at this point in time. That was the one and only item that MnDOT does not declare eligible for the funds received. Obviously, we'll explore other opportunities. There's other grants out there. There might be other partnerships. we can't guarantee it right now, right? Because that was specifically in the budget, but all the other stuff is eligible. And we'll work through some separate agreements after the fact with MnDOT's. But upon, tonight's action, we actually plan on having survey crews start field work this week. That's how tight the timeline is. There's a lot of field work that needs to be done on the preliminary survey side and also the environmental side with wetlands and endangered species and all that stuff that we have to go through that process too, and DNR property in the area too. So, and we also want to, have enough conversation with project partners like Rice Creek Watershed District and Washington Conservation District and Clear Lake Association, because there's a common interest of shoreline restoration. That's part of the project that's funded and eligible for the funding that's we identified here too. So overall, we feel like we have a pretty conservative budget in that 4.5 million that was awarded. Until we start doing some of that field work, we can't, narrow that risk down at this point until we start doing some of the soil boring work too. But otherwise, yeah, you guys got a big, one of the biggest wishes answered that we could have asked for.
Yeah,
right?
let's get on it.
And now we just got to hit it hard and fast. The intent then would be have this project ready to start construction after the 4th of July. So that's anticipated schedule outlined within the memo. So tonight we're just formally requesting the city authorize preparation of plans and specifications for the Eureka Avenue improvements that will be funded from the state general funds administered by MnDOT through the 2023 Local Improvement Program legislation earmark grant.
Quick question. You mentioned construction starting like essentially a year from today. Do you expect that to be done within one construction season? Is that the thought, or?
It'll be substantially complete. That means it might not be able to get closed out because we're not going to close something out if the restoration isn't approved, or if there's, just some minor punch list items that need to still be addressed. If it's not completed going into winter, then we would keep the contract open. We have till 2027. End of June 2027, I believe that was the date, but we're not getting anywhere close to that. The funds are still eligible.
Okay. That was going to be my next question. If we weren't able to hit within 2024, if you run into some, I don't know, wetland, some delay that you're not able to hit 2024, with the other projects that are planned for the area, what would be that next window? Or is there really not a good second option?
Probably really not a good second option because
we gotta make this work then.
this area was very successful with the state bonding bill money,
Mhm.
including Highway 8, some stuff on 95, some stuff over in Blaine and Highway 65. So
Yeah.
we're kind of going to pinch this whole
Yeah.
region over the next 3-4 years.
I would say keep us in scope and let's get it done in a year, right?
During the planning process, can we do something about weight restrictions or speed limits, or is that not part of the scope of the work?
Well, we do have a full reconstruction section. Now, sometimes your R value depends on what's already out there. I mean, we're not going to dig down and dig everything out, right? So that's what the soil borings need to determine. We have the full standard section in there that would traditionally meet a 10-ton road. Now, if we have very poor subgrade soils, then we have to fight that factor, and then we'll look at some other things, but that should be achievable. Speed limits, yeah, we ideally want to be able to just put up speed limit, right? But if we can put any speed limit up, but it's not going to be enforceable unless we run through a process to identify a legal speed limit. So that would traditionally be done by a speed study. In the old days, we had to do that through MnDOT because this is a local road. We have our avenues of doing that now, and we still would run the same normal process that MnDOT would do. We could use our own police department and stuff and to shoot the speed and stuff like that. But again, it kind of falls back on the 85 percentile, what that actual speed is. But through the design, you could pinch the lane widths down a little bit. Maybe there's some curb and gutter in some spots, to make it more like traffic calming, feel a restrictive passageway.
Yeah, the reason I brought it up is that sometimes even big trucks will use that as kind of a shortcut. You know, it really doesn't seem appropriate there.
Could
You-
put a speed bump in, but Public Works would not want to talk to
they're-
you.
Yeah, they wouldn't like that, no.
Dave says no.
It's just that the public uses that road
Build
a
a
lot.
tourist semi.
But the pedestrian traffic uses that road a lot, you know, so. we gotta do-
There's
we
going to
gotta-
be pedestrian elements there, right?
Yeah, but not with 18-wheelers running down there.
The goal is to accomplish and incorporate some pedestrian facilities. Again, the width is going to be the main factor until that field work, the survey, the delineation is done. We won't actually know what footprint we can have to fit some stuff in.
Ron, will there be an opportunity similar like with the county and state to have some feedback by the community, neighborhoods?
Oh,
meeting, open
most
house?
definitely. We'll want to engage, especially Clear Lake Association on this project.
In that 217th where that dumps in that private road, I would assume they're gonna have some feelings either way on that.
One positive there, that roadway from there to the north was reconstructed with that temporary off-ramp, so there is a pretty good sub-base in that portion of the area, so that construction will be minimized compared to what it will be south of there. And we could set the project up in stages too, and clearly communicate that to the property owners and EMS. So,
I'm ready for a motion if you.
Yeah, any other discussion? I think the overall sentiment is we need to get started because time is short and it's nice to have an opportunity to have this project funded. Councilmember Husnick, you look like you're ready for a
Yeah,
motion.
I'd make a motion to authorize the preparation of plans and specifications for Eureka Avenue improvements.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any other discussion? Echo the comments made about, also about just, you know, engagement with the Lake Association, and we'll get great feedback from them, so look forward to those discussions as well. Any other points of discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, oppose, and motion carries. That ends our regular agenda items this evening. We do have one item as a workshop topic, which is for the Hidden Creek Council request. I believe we have a number of individuals here to potentially speak, and maybe just first to tee up, this will be a workshop session. Anything we talk about tonight is just informal discussion. It's a working session of council. Anything that requires actually official vote will come at a future meeting, and so this will be very informal. Maybe an opportunity to hear from Abby first, and if you would like to speak afterwards, happy to hear your comments as well. And Abby, do you want to get us kicked off?
Sure, I'll keep it really high level. Hidden Creek, which is up on the board for you, is a development that the city has been reviewing for the last couple of years. 2022, the city did extend approval of a preliminary plat until February of 24. Just as a heads up, since that time that Hidden Creek has been before this body, I've had pretty consistent communication with the development team. We've been continually trying to work to see what kind of development they can move forward with in this climate that we're in. So what is before you, or what they've designed now, is a 22-lot first phase of Hidden Creek. This is, just look at the yellow, the red outline, don't worry about kind of the other stuff, but this would be the area that would be improved, essentially Headwaters Parkway, a road going up, houses on each side. It's far from the 100-plus lot development that the Hidden Creek was hoping to do, but they do believe they could probably get this in this year and start building even potentially, maybe not this year, building this year. I hope they're nodding over there. So there's a few different challenges with the development. Cost for infrastructure is just a large factor, and the development representatives, Paul Bergerman and John Dobbs, kind of chat with you some about that. I'm just going to highlight the 3 asks that they're asking of the city to consider. These are really policy-based questions that staff can't answer. And even though our traditional practices go to the Planning Commission makes recommendation to the City Council, I don't want to say that the Planning Commission's voice in this doesn't matter. However, ultimately, these are going to be big policy-based things that the City Council is going to have to weigh in on. So we will be going back to the Planning Commission with final plating. It'll come back before you. We'll get some comments at that time. But right now, the developers are just seeking some direction from the council and moving forward. So the first item for consideration is reduction of the roadway widths. This would be the internal roadways. The city standard is 32 feet face-to-face, 34 back-to-back. They're asking for a 4-foot reduction in those internal roadways to 30-foot back-to-back. One of the biggest reasons that they're asking this, one, is to help reduce overall land costs. But the project is a part of the Headwaters planned unit development. This was the final master plan that was, wow, maybe 15, 20 years ago now, 2006, I believe. This is the area that we're looking to develop with Hidden Creek, somewhere right in around in here. Maybe it's even maybe a little bit right here. But as part of that development, the city did contemplate reduced roadway widths. In fact, if you can see my cursor, it's always hard on these. We do have a neighborhood where 30-foot roadways were approved. That's just to the south of the Fenway Park neighborhood. I think that was Headwaters' 3rd edition. The land use for this neighborhood north of Headwaters Parkway is very similar to the Hidden Creek Park neighborhood that's being proposed. And so the question has been raised about just consistency within this neighborhood of the 30-foot consideration. Talking with Public Works, there isn't issue with public infrastructure. We can still snowplow. The biggest issue really arises when we have parking on both sides. This would need to be required to be a parking single-sided neighborhood. If we have parking on only one side, then our emergency service personnel can get through as well. So that is one thing for your consideration tonight. Then the next question that's before you is utility looping. So right now there is infrastructure. The water main extends and would be extended in Headwaters Parkway, which I suppose I should just pull up that plat or that design concept plan, that roadway coming through. The intent is to loop the water up to, I think it's Enfield Avenue to the north. The developers are requesting the city consider not looping that water main extension. The concern from city staff is just for personal and public safety use. Water pressure could be a concern. While we think that the pressure could be there, some of the other benefits to water looping is that if there is a main break on one side, we still have water. You reduce the amount of people that are without water. If you've got a break, you can service the water from the other location. Also, looping really just helps with water quality. The more that you're flushing it through your system, the less sediment buildup there is. So that is another added benefit. We have approved at least one development in the last, I think, 10 years, Chestnut Creek, that didn't require the looping of utilities. There were concerns in that neighborhood about water pressure. Additionally, there's no plan in sight, even though Chestnut Creek at the time was hoping to do multiple phases. There's no plan in sight for that other half of that development. There is a risk that we might never get that. So one of the things that staff mentions in the report that staff thinks could be consideration for the council is requiring a 4-inch temporary line with some sort of temporary easement or some sort of easement over that. That wouldn't require them to put in the big infrastructure, the water main, the sewer main that has to go under it, but it would still help us without the pressure, the quality, the concerns of future use for public safety, personal use. And then lastly, the construction of Headwaters Parkway. So as noted in the master PUD, Headwaters Parkway was designed to have that parkway design that's carrying through all the way from Highway 61 right now to Fenway. This is designed as a major collector road, but regardless, our policy is development pays its own way. It doesn't matter if it's a really big road, and it doesn't matter if it's a collector road. And so what the development team is asking is something that might help reduce those costs of Headwater Parkway. So a couple of the options that they've proposed is only building half of Headwaters Parkway. So Headwaters Parkway is going to have a median going through it that they would only build the asphalted surface to their side of the median. The other, my notes here. The other one would be to shrink Headwaters Parkway's width. That is one that staff notes that we're not in support of, just because even though the development right now, the neighborhood right now doesn't support a really big road, this is going to end up becoming a high volume trafficked road when our transportation system is complete. The couple options that staff put in here that other communities use is when you've got these major collector roads, they plan for them in their CIP. But we've been looking at our CIP, we've been looking at those 10-year plans, we've been looking at our past practices, and we just simply we haven't budgeted for it, and we really don't have the money for it. I think that's something that this body and future bodies need to maybe consider in the future when we play transportation catch-up or roadway catch-up. But that being said, the other option that staff notes is the possibility of cost sharing and potentially assessing adjacent property owners. Though neither of those are things that the city, I think, has considered in the past. Both of those would be big new policy. So this is not, as the Mayor Bain had indicated, so I should note, no matter what we do with any three of these is going to set precedents. This is right on the edge of future development area that's planned for within the community. We just talked with your legislative representatives, talking about the growth that's anticipated in that kind of southwest corner. And a lot of that is residential that's going to have a similar design and feel as Hidden Creek. The decisions that the direction the council provides could set precedents for those other future developments. There's no formal action required tonight. What staff and the developer are seeking is some direction to see if interior roadway, reduced roadways are favorable, acceptable. If there's an option to looping that utility, and then lastly, something with Headwaters Parkway. So again, I will mention Paul Bergerman and John Dobbs are here tonight. They're with Headwaters Land Group LLC to talk with you about this project. Do you have any questions for me?
Any immediate questions for Abby? Some as discussion continues. Mr. Bergman, Mr. Dobbs, I'm happy to hear anything you might want council to hear. Floor is yours.
I'll make it brief. My name is John Dobbs. Yeah, I'll just very quickly kind of summarize. One of them is the roadway width is a conversation we've been having with staff. We've had out there PUD from before for years back. So roadway width isn't a new discussion. The parking on one side, we on the development side don't really have an opinion about that one way or the other. That's just not from our seat something that needs to happen or doesn't need to happen. So if that's what the city wants or needs to agree to a 30-foot back of curb, we would go along with that. So if that's what Public Works' main concern was, we understand. I would, on number 2, related to the water, and I'll just start, I should back up. So 2 things happened in the last year, year and a half in the development world. One of them is that we saw, and I know our costs aren't necessarily something for a public discussion in terms of what the city council should be concerned about, but in general, development side costs went up 15 to 20% between February and June of last year. Federal Reserve policy and in their economic data says 15% nationwide in 12 months. As you guys all know, I'm sure what we do for a living is incredibly expensive, and real estate prices don't adjust that quick. So the value stayed the same, cost went up that much in 365 days. On top of that, we also have had what was the prime rate, our cost of borrowing money in early 22 was 3%. Today it stands at 8.25. So, which is putting an awful lot of stress on the real estate market. And so that's kind of why we're here, trying to figure some of that stuff out. And we want to do this long term. This isn't just 22 lots. This is a bigger project. So Abby, could you throw the picture of the neighborhood back up for me, please? In the staff report, there was a comment, and I've heard from staff about a particular neighborhood that was also cited in the staff report. And with all due respect, I would suggest a better comp is comparable neighborhood is the neighborhood just to our north. From the townhouses on 200th Street to the west, I'm assuming is a stub street with a water main stubbed at the end, which we would eventually connect into. That's 23 lots. Ours is 22. I think the neighborhood that was mentioned in the staff report is, I don't know the exact count, but I'm guessing it's 60 or 70 lots on a stub water main. So we're really not asking for much more than what already exists to the north of us. And my understanding is from staff that that neighborhood never has had a water pressure issue as long as anybody's aware. So I would suggest that's a better comparable. The real challenge isn't just the water main, and although I genuinely appreciate the staff's approach to a 4-inch main and which was just to connect and the other things in the report. I really am grateful for that. I would also generally suggest the other side of that coin is we don't really believe that if there's a problem, we understand safety issues. If there is a water pressure issue that doesn't meet the fire code, we understand that completely. I do not believe that exists. So if I'm wrong, somebody can certainly tell me that. That being said, it isn't just water for us. The sewer is deeper. So if we were actually going to formally connect it with an 8-inch main from the north edge of our 22 lots to Enfield, we also have to put all the sewer in as well because the sewer is deeper than the water. So it isn't just water. So I guess we don't really believe that, and we understand, and I understand from staff's point of view. For our point of view, we're not asking for anything that doesn't already exist to the north. They're 23 lots. We're 22. They're bigger houses than what we go in. So more bathrooms, more water use than the site we're proposing and the builder is proposing for size. And then the last one is Headwaters Parkway, and Abby did a great job with that. And I'll just take a second and say, even though there were some previous people up here talking about her, we agree to disagree, and it is nothing but respect. I have had a really good working experience with her. So off the record, I'll just say she's awesome, even though she doesn't agree with me a lot. But then again, I can be difficult to work with, just ask my wife. The Headwaters Parkway has been a challenge, and it's been a challenge for us for a long time. The width, the cost of it all being borne on the neighborhood. We understand the policy, we've understood it for years. I would respectfully suggest it isn't just a 48-foot wide street with a median. It's a 48-foot wide street with 8 to 12 feet of concrete in the middle, which is much more expensive than asphalt. It has, tell me where I missed this, Ryan, but I believe it's got 12 inches of gravel underneath the entire thing and 2 to 2.5 feet of sand, depending on what you find. So what you're really talking about is a road section. It's almost 3 feet deep, 48 feet wide. A typical collector street in your area or whatever, maybe I don't have the word right, but a regular street that would handle that volume of traffic would typically be how wide in this city if it wasn't the Parkway? 36, 30.
A major collector roads are designed to be larger. So Ryan might know the standard there, but.
So all the major roadways have different characteristics and serviceability, right? Headwaters Parkway is what we've continued to do, what the vision and the PUD has kind of outlined, the extension of it, and now we're jumping over several acres and coming out to the west and developing. Gonna put some houses. That's just could potentially fill in the stuff south of there much faster. But eventually, once we make this connection out to Elmcrest, Hornsby, and that loop is completed, our traffic's gonna significantly increase. Knowing that through the AUR that the city's completed and all the work that we did with the LRP grants, because they could see that how instead of coming all the way down over to Fenway, then back into development, they're just gonna turn down, get off the interstate right at 97, turn down Columbus, or in Columbus there, Hornsby, then circle back in these neighborhoods. So we know that. So if you wanna build something temporary, we're gonna have to pay for it very quickly later. And that's where the conversation has gone, to stay true to what the Parkway vision has been and limited access to it.
I guess where I was trying to go with that was the 48-foot wide with the section and all the other stuff under it is a pretty expensive road to build by anybody's standards. And so, yeah, we would love to see it shrunk. We would also, but if we can't get there, what we would like to do is we still have to put the entire road base in. You can't just put in, even if so everybody said, okay, we can do 32 foot, for example, and I don't know that that's the right one. I don't know traffic engineering nearly as well as Brian does, and he's forgotten more than I know. That being said, let's say it's a 32-foot wide road to get traffic going both ways, and we got a temporary asphalt curb. We still have to put the gravel and the sand, compact and build the road base as if we're eventually going to build the whole parkway, because you can't just section that stuff off, contaminate the sand, contaminate the gravel. So really what we're asking, if we can't figure out a way to shrink it, then if we just temporarily build 2/3 of it or whatever the agreed on width is, that gives us some time and it gives the city some time to kind of think about and talk about what not only comes in this section. Abby, can you put the overall plat up, please? Not only what comes in this section, but what comes future, and we actually control the land going south as well.
Like the
and
plan.
So it allows all of us more time to kind of work through some alignment stuff. We are pretty excited about the idea of getting off the ground finally. We have a builder that's pretty excited about the opportunity. And I'll close it by just simply saying, Paul may have a couple comments. The reason that it's 22 lots is because when it gets any bigger than that, it triggers the stormwater pond in the middle of the site. And so Rice Creek Watershed, we can't go 23 or 24 lots. We get to 24 lots, we got to build all of the stormwater infrastructure to handle the majority of the site and clean the water in the majority of the site. So 22 lots was the cutoff. The next phase has to go up and connect to Fenway. I'm sorry, is that right? No, that's not right. Enfield, I apologize. Otherwise, we can't get a permit to do anything else from Rice Creek Watershed. So that's how we got to 22 lots. And we're just trying to break up the cost. There are 3 large expenses in the site, Headwaters being one of them. The crossing into Headwaters has a mini bridge of sorts. It is very expensive to put in. And the last one is the stormwater system is incredibly expensive to put in. So just trying to work through a tough spot. Got anything you want to add, Paul? Thank you very much, and I'll take any questions. And yeah, I think it's just safe to say that we agree to disagree with some aspects of what staff has said, and that's fine, right?
Understood. And if you could, don't go far. If we have, in our discussion, we'll have some questions, I'm sure. Welcome.
Hi, I'm Paul Bruggeman, and thank you for this opportunity to discuss this with us. As far as Headwaters Parkway, I don't think anybody in this room really knows where it's going. So I think a reasonable solution, like John said, we would put in the base for the entire width of the road, and we're just asking, and it's going nowhere, right? It doesn't go anywhere, it stops, and then that would give us time before we do our next phase, or as we do our next phase, to figure out, have the city, the staff work on where that road is gonna go, and a realistic alignment to see if it is actually gonna use or have the traffic that everybody's anticipating. I personally don't think it's gonna go where it's drawn on the map to go, because I don't know who's gonna pay for it to run through a wetland. So I understand their concern, but it's not, it doesn't go anywhere today, and it just would help us get this first phase off the ground. And the builder that we have planned, they're already telling us to get going on the next phase so we can put the next 44 lots in, or 43 lots in next spring. So our intent is to continue to keep moving on this project. We just don't want to spend money that we don't need to in this first phase that's so expensive for us to get off the ground. If this was a normal development with normal upfront expenses, we get that. This was astronomical. Thank you.
Let's start with the discussion, if we could, maybe in reverse order, and since Headwaters is kind of the most recent talked about, if we could maybe start on some feedback on that. Do I understand that, so you would be amenable to building a portion, like half, one side of it? Is that what you're?
We're agreeable to build the entire base of the whole road. What we'd like to pave is half of it now until we can figure out what its actual use and access is going to be.
And it would be one side of the one side, your development side. What is on, can we have a map of what is on the other? And do you control the other side of?
Yes, yep.
Okay.
So I guess what we would propose is a 32-foot asphalt surface with or without curb. I don't know if we have to have that to have that road usable. I mean, we're not going anywhere past our entrance. It doesn't, people are gonna drive off into the field if they go beyond our entrance. So yes.
And was that, Abby, was that acceptable from staff perspective, would be to to fully pave one side of that?
I think one just concern from city staff is that we will only have one half
other
of the
portion
road
will never-
built. Now, that being said, I think with greater discussion, hearing, grading and prepping 100%, maybe there is a way with a development agreement and, easements and letters of credit that we can get to that assurance. I think at the very minimum, we need to have very safe two-way traffic on that one half. I don't know what that looks like. I'm talking right here, and I can just tell by looks that I might be getting that we might not be in agreement.
Understood.
But I think that there could be some merit there in exploring that further, as it is only going to serve those 22 lots.
Reasonable approach.
To that, though, if whoever comes in, let's say I get hit by a bus walking out of here tonight, and there's
Don't do
another
that, but-
developer.
Yes.
The city has the control over approving their plat. So if let's just say we built half of the road, and Mr. Smith comes in to develop the other project, well, the city's gonna say, well, hey, you know what, you gotta build the other half. It's no different than what they're doing to us. So I don't wanna pay for this whole road, but I'm here, we have to. We're just trying to say, let's make sure first we need it, and if we do, we'll put it in, and we're putting the money in to put the base down for the whole road. So we're doing it under the assumption, in good faith, everybody knows where this is gonna go and that the traffic is there. Again, I'm just a home builder, land developer guy. I don't think it's gonna be used like they anticipate. I've done a lot of work up in this city, and 195th is a shorter cut through. I know it's not paved today, but it's gonna be, and 97 is a faster way to come around than going through all those neighborhoods. So.
Council feedback or, yeah.
Ryan, you probably be the only one that recall this, and I may be wrong here, but was Headwaters going east when originally, was it just same thing, or was a split and the second part was done in a different phase? Basically what they're asking. Recall that be the case, but maybe not.
Well, I know you were asking, Ryan. I don't think any of the staff or consulting team that's here tonight was here when the original Headwaters was. I did have the plans, the design was going to be carried through to the west. Are you asking if?
Going east when it first went in, we're talking
Oh.
15, when Len Pratt built, I thought only part of that road was done and the second part was done at a later.
You're
I think-
suggesting that there's been precedent that we allowed one way
Right.
to be done first.
So they built it to Fitzgerald, but it was 4 lanes, not the 2 that we're talking about.
But it was 4 lanes on one side.
2 lanes on each side, 4 lanes total with turn lanes, and a much wider median. So Fitzgerald to 61 was completed, and then the north leg of the Parkway was built, 2 lanes still, so you could have 2-way traffic until you got to Forest Road, and they had to build a oversized section through there, but a lot of that broke out and had to be taken out, part of that grant we got, and did the south leg of that Parkway.
So the north side was built first.
But you had 2 lanes the entire way until you got to Fitzgerald, and then Fitzgerald you had 4.
I guess I don't understand that, but one of the PUD booklets states that the road east of Fenway could be a 2-lane road. It's not needed to be built at the same level of the road east of Fenway. Excuse me, did I say that wrong? West of Fenway didn't need to be built to the same standard of the road east of Fenway.
And west of Fenway, we are continuing with the 2-lane road with a median in the middle.
But just for comparison, the traffic on 97 right now, I know that it's all going to be reconstructed, but that's 2 lanes. Most of that road is 2-lane, and there's no way there's gonna be that traffic on Headwaters Parkway.
It just seems that if they're putting in the base for the whole thing, that it'd be a reasonable approach to getting it done. Because then it would also be ready to go for the next phase.
Correct.
I'm open. I think it's important to set the right stage and build that full base. And if, I think it's whatever is something that's in the development agreement or something to make it clear that the intent is that long-term will be as designed. But if there is a bridge from, here to there, that is a kind of a temporary, nervous we open a bit of a can of worms, but I can appreciate that it's a heavy lift for just this small portion of development.
And if I may, I think it's very important for the council to retain the design of the Headwaters, ultimately the 4 lanes and the median. We know that development's going to be along the interstate, and there's certain things that may happen there that will cause this road to go through. Development in Lino Lakes, development in Columbus. Firms are looking at that along the interstate, warehousing type of business park issues. So no matter what the council decides on, whether we do allow the temporary 2-lane, that's fine if that's what we get to, but it's really important to retain the overall design of the 2 lanes each direction with the median.
And I think that's what I was trying to say. Because I do agree with you. Maintain that design, maintain the whatever easements, whatever, so we can end up ultimately with that 4-lane. Will that work for you guys?
Yes.
I mean, I'm only one vote, but just trying to get a.
Any other kind of perspectives on that topic?
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, at some point, if at some point, if we have a policy change where we have to contribute to part of this in the development to continue that look, I do agree the look needs to, long-term, it's just better for me.
I just want to clarify, right now, west of Fenway, it's 1 lane each direction with turn lanes at particular intersections. And that's what's the continued proposal with the median in the middle.
And we're
Do
agreeable.
you not want the median and go temporary 32-foot road? I mean, because if the median's not going in, it's probably not going to go in then, right?
No, I think the median needs to go in.
Yeah.
Why does the
Because
median not go in?
you're not going to have the width to have 2 lanes of traffic on one side of this road because the road is narrower. I think it's 16 feet. I wasn't prepared for this particular question. So the curb face to face, I think, is 16 feet through here with the median and the skinny areas. You can't fit 2-lane traffic. So are you going to build the north curb, 16-foot pave, and the median? Then what are you going to pave a temporary?
No.
But
Can
what I would
answer what I would propose? Can I answer what I would propose?
Sure.
Build the north curb and then build a 32-foot asphalt road, either with a temporary curb, knowing that we will probably have to tear some of it out to go ahead with that
Then
center median at a future date.
Can I make a recommendation on this particular topic? It sounds like maybe council is open to some sort of a temporary design, as long as there is, I can summarize, as long as there is a foundation made for the entire roadway, but the detail that you're kind of talking about now of what's constructed when, I'd personally love for there to be some more staff collaboration and bring that back to council. Just, it seems like maybe we're leaning closer to how that road is staged in construction rather than a change in design standard. And it's, if I can summarize, council seems to be open to a staging that will get us to a future end state, but what those phases look like, I think maybe there's time for some additional kind of staff collaboration. That seem fair?
You good with that?
I'm just curious, Ryan, are you saying right now west of Fenway, have we already lost the Parkway look because it's just 2 lanes of traffic?
No, we have the Parkway, the median, the character of that Parkway is continued, like City Council and Planning Commission have supported, and that's why I speak on this side, and I just want you guys to have the history, and that, you know, that's kind of what they've guided. My concern is if you want the median and you don't install it now, you're gonna come in and you're gonna have to fit all those grades and those tapers and get that pavement to work without you thinking you're removing basically a lot of that pavement in all those turn lane areas. Knowing the details of the design and being in the field for 2 decades of my career, I know how difficult that is gonna match.
You're saying the rebuild, what it's
To
going to
fit
take.
a median at a later date, there's gonna be a lot more removals than you would think to make those grades and tapers work and tie it back in the right way. I just want to have that open and honest, because if we want to go down the temporary route, maybe it is an oversized roadway with no with no median, if that's what the desire is to support.
But weren't we saying that the median would be built and the 2 lanes would be on the one side? Fit it in.
My understanding is that they were proposing not to build a median, but a 32 face-to-face or back-to-back roadway.
I think the mayor's suggestion is correct, that we should go back and knowing that there is a direction to make some kind of a solution, that we do a little bit more work to staff and get that to the planning commission or to the council for that decision.
And because I think we need to be clear on if we're making a change in policy in the long term, what is the design for Headwaters Parkway? Is it important for council to continue to have that median? And if that is just not possible, then that's a different conversation. We can have it, but I think there's a little bit of maybe not agreement on what that temporary solution might look like.
I think the council is telling us that it's really not a policy change on what the roadway is going to look like, but it's how to accommodate the request of the developer on a temporary basis, and what's the most efficient way to do that, but also what's the future way to do that, so that when we have to do, or whoever has to do the second phase, it makes more sense, and whether the median stays in there and is built that way or not. So we have some discussions still to take on that particular issue.
Sound fair? All right, maybe going in reverse order, the question around the the looping of the utilities. As I just heard kind of the conversation back and forth, is there some agreement that a temporary might be the 4-inch line, or is that also?
I'm not sure there's an agreement, but that's the staff's recommendation because we are concerned with safety and
Well,
the temporary
yeah,
looping.
so I guess my comment was, I genuinely appreciate and respect trying to, soften the blow of connecting the water. All due respect, I think the comparable, honestly, is the subdivision just to the north of us. And I've had this conversation with staff directly, and my question was, look, if we got a water pressure problem that we don't meet code, we understand. And what I'm now reading is that there's concerns about a system, and I understand that, but to Paul's point, if Paul and I are hit on the bus and somebody else can pick up the land, they're gonna have to, you have to go north, you have to connect to infield the next lot that you build after 22. Rice Creek Watershed won't approve anything else because the stormwater system has to go in. So.
And we plan on moving forward and being in here and building that next phase in the spring of 2024 to connect that road. So we just don't want to put this temporary line or any line in for a 6-month period at the cost of, I don't know, $60,000, $70,000, $80,000.
And if it's a balance, the surety has to be there in case something happens to us and we go away. Well, that's still cost. You pay for a surety, just like any other loan. It's real money. Banks charge you for it. They don't give it for free, and they charge you interest on top. So if we understand, but it's an expense, and we're just trying to figure out how to get the project off the ground. If that's the only way this flies, Paul and I will have to talk about it. but, you know, the site, the first 22 lots can't handle sewer and water extended to Enfield. That's a no-starter. So, yeah.
I think more detail on that, the conversation I heard and the intent of this was to take the shortest route possible with this 4-inch to connect the two, right? And that could be drilled, open cut, and an easement would be acquired over that, so that way you'd have access to it, right? And that gets abandoned in the future versus having to install the 8-inch up a planned roadway after you install the sewer, because the sewer would be deeper. This is just gonna be shot to infield. Fire chief had concerns because if we do have a fire break in that area, we have no fire coverage.
I didn't think that was, wait a minute, that's new news.
This is just conversation that staff had that suggest how the suggestion of the 4-inch came up.
Okay, but you're telling me something that I thought there wasn't a fire issue, there was enough pressure. You're
No,
saying
I'm
there
not
isn't?
saying I'm not talking pressure right now. Simply, if we have a water main break, we don't have water out this way. The fire coverage then, we wouldn't be able to hook up to a hydrant. Because we have to chase it all the way back to headwaters where it's looped to the east. So that was one of the points. You know, obviously the water quality, when you get to the dead ends, it's better to have the water moving constantly. And if there's shallow stuff, you know, it helps on the freezability and water quality. And then the breaks and isolation was Public Works had concerns. And then there's the pressure. Overall, do we think the pressure is probably gonna pass if we do a model? Yeah. Some of those peaks, high points could be variable, especially if all the irrigation's going on and people are trying to use their own appliances and stuff like that. And or if one of the towers had a situation, which is the south tower, was the closest, for some reason was low on water levels, and then all this stuff's going on, irrigation. Those are all the things that were factored into why the staff suggested a 4-inch temporary line to close the loop that way.
Do we know if that neighborhood to the north that they're referenced is looped?
I'm not sure which neighborhood you're referencing, so if I brought it up on a map, could you show me?
So what Mr. Dobbs is talking about is the water main dead ends going down Enfield. So 23 houses back, dead ends, but there also isn't a cul-de-sac at the end of it because past developers said, yep, in another year, we're gonna be extending south and we're gonna add water main. Same thing with Chestnut Creek. That was 2018. Yep, next year we're gonna come here and we're gonna build another homes and we're gonna connect the water main. So myself, when I see this happen a bunch of times where we have dead end roads and water mains that lead to nowhere, I mean, I appreciate the fact that yes, they're gonna be back here next spring and do the next 44, but that might not happen either. And then we're stuck with 2 dead ends now, one with 23 homes on it, one with 22.
Is there agreement that if when you go beyond, the project beyond 22 homes and you're now at your larger project, is that automatically, does that need to be looping? Is there
Yes.
agreement that,
And we plan on doing that their next phase.
okay,
The
so our
next
risk,
43 lots will bring that connection to infill.
our risk is really what Dave just mentioned, is if for some reason that didn't happen and we don't have a crystal ball, then we are left with this stub.
But
that-
you don't have a health and safety issue with the water pressure. Yeah, you might have a dead end, but there's dead ends, Ryan, in every city, the one right up in Enfield, and the people have managed fine for the last 15 or 20 years.
Understood.
So that's not our intention. Our intention is to keep moving forward with this development. But yeah, that's right. It would be a dead end, but no different than what Enfield has. And it would be sufficient water pressure, from what I've been told, from a health and safety issue.
Can I
That's kind of what surety bonds are for too, you know, guarantee this stuff happens.
The other thing, what we could do is we could put a letter of credit in place for that. If we don't do it, then you'd have the money to put it in at some other time. But for us to put it in literally for 6 months, doesn't make any sense to anybody. It can't. I mean, we're gonna do this project this fall, we're gonna start up again next spring. I mean, you know, how many houses are even gonna be on this with water that they're gonna draw by the time we do this connection? I don't think all 22 of these houses.
Agree with all respect. I mean, the concern is if that second project doesn't happen, so.
No, that's what I'm saying. We could put a letter of credit together that would cover the expense of running that 4-inch line if we don't come back in here and do it.
Can that 4-inch line be run after the fact? I mean, is that a possibility?
Well, I do think, and something I was going to ask is some sort of letter of credit for that extension. And as part of the development agreement, I'd look to legal counsel on the fly to say, you know, maybe it's a if this, then that, or if not by this time. You know, the idea of a second phase coming in the spring, maybe it's one of those things, if it's not there by the fall, we have the right to execute on that letter of credit. Now,
Seems like you could
I
do
know that that's not the most ideal, but that helps at least give the city the protections 1 year out from this year, or, you know, what we can kind of negotiate to say, okay, if you don't do it, we're not going to be in another Enfield or Chestnut Creek or whatever situation. It does put us in that situation for a little while, though.
Points of input from council on that?
Yeah, I mean,
particular
I'd
topic?
hate to spend that kind of money for 6 months, but I can appreciate staff's concern. So if we can mitigate that, that's a win-win in my book.
But that's what letter of credits are for, and bonding and all this other stuff too. We can kind of guarantee that we could get it to happen by next fall if they didn't start the next phase by spring or whatever.
And you're open to a letter of credit
Yes.
option on that?
Can I ask just one clarifying question on the record, and this may be directed, that letter of credit for that 4-inch temporary, or would we want to see that that letter of credit for the full connection up that they would intend to build in the spring?
I'm just proposing a letter of credit for the 4-inch, because the next developer that comes in is gonna have to what? Oh, put the sewer and water and streets in.
Yep,
So
I
you
just
can't
wanted,
do
to-
it.
I just wanted to ask that question on the record, though, so
Yep.
that,
So that's all I'm proposing is a letter of credit for the shot 4-inch line.
And the 4-inch line, though, does provide us with that looping and the benefits that the city's looking for.
Part of that plat approval, though, we should have that temporary easement or that easement as
Yes.
well.
That
So
and-
if you had to.
yeah, and that's written in my staff report, that I think whatever conditions come forth, we would have plenty of agreements and easements and all sorts of things that city would sometimes forget in the past. We will make sure that we have them, so.
So also just to clarify, phase 2 is planned for 24?
No, phase 2 is 43.
No, 2024, sorry.
I'm sorry?
Is-
Oh, yeah, yes, I'm
2024.
sorry.
So just kind of with the roadway construction, we wouldn't even be paving the wear course or thinking of it until we got 70% built out there. In phase 1, you traditionally wouldn't put the trail in on the north side of the parkway until at least 24, part of phase 1. So there are a lot of road costs that won't even be incurred until 24 or later. But then you're bringing on 43 lots in phase 2, so then you would have 60 to 70?
65.
I think one of the things, just maybe going back to that Headwaters Parkway, we talked about this temporary 2-lane. The idea would be that we'd end up with the full Headwaters Parkway development by the time all of Hidden Creek's 135 units are developed. 125, thank you. I think you agree with that, correct?
I
That-
do. Yeah,
that-
we do.
that
I
at the
still
time
would
of
like to
full-
have that as a discussion, because I seriously don't know where this road is going, and I don't think anybody in this room knows where that road is going.
Okay, and I only put that on the record that maybe we can write into our
Yeah,
development
after our
agreement a
phase.
phased approach for the roadway construction. So at phase 1, this needs to occur, phase 2 and subsequent.
Ultimately, yes, we agree that we have to build Headwaters Parkway as it's designed right now.
Yes, thank you, Paul, for the just clarification.
Yep.
Should we talk about interior street width? So, did we, and I probably shouldn't ask a question I don't know the answer to, but I really am drawing a blank on this. And because we're in workshop, I'm gonna ask a question I don't know the answer to. Didn't we address interior street width when we did the MXR1?
No, we did not. We just, we started
Did
to
we
talk
talk about it?
We talked a little bit about the other types of development standards that we could review. We internally, staff started to review them some. We haven't brought anything back for formal consideration. I think we maybe had some high-level discussions of, hey, we can look at these things. Should we? We have, but we're also in development season, and policy development always doesn't happen right now.
Understood. And when we had those And could you refresh my memory on the neighborhoods of what's being proposed where we have allowed that? Was it Chestnut Creek?
I don't, where we have the MXR one or the reduced street width?
No, the reduced street width.
I don't know if Chestnut Creek is, but I do know the Headwaters Third. I'm just gonna turn off our water mains here and pull in, zoom in, just to the north of Headwaters Parkway across from Leela. These are roadways with 30-foot roadway widths. I haven't measured, spot checked in the neighborhoods, but I would say coming through here, whatever road name that is, that's quite a narrower road through there.
And
It's
with
not completely
sidewalk-
uncovered.
With sidewalk both sides or sidewalk one side?
Sidewalk on one side, pedestrian facilities on one side.
It just starts to, we start to go from large streets with sidewalks on both sides and lots of room for kids and bikes and strollers and all of that good stuff, and then lots of parking, and then we just make it smaller. And already started this path again by having some approvals for those interior widths. I fully understand the economics. It just makes me a little, somebody who lives in a neighborhood that does not have great sidewalks, smaller street widths, I wish we had a higher standard, but I can appreciate the economic values.
Well, 30 feet is
Challenging.
pretty common street width in our world. A lot of cities, that's what their standards are.
I don't know, open to thoughts for council.
Yeah, I mean, we certainly have done it before. I think, this neighborhood would probably be, would accommodate what's needed.
Do you think that that will set the stage for the rest of the 100 acres, or would you see it as, are you kind of phasing based on kind of potential value of homes or something where you would, if we say yes to these 22 homes, do you think that that's the standard for the full 100+ acres?
Yeah. I mean, it's really kind of a standard. You guys, your streets are larger than we're finding in most municipalities, in my experience. I mean, Ryan deals probably with more cities than I do, but 30-foot street is pretty standard out there. There's some cities that are doing 28. I think you're right, that's too narrow, but 30s are pretty common. And you've done it in the right next to where we're in the same PUD area, right?
And there isn't a concern from a public safety, snow removal, that wasn't the concern, it's more kind of aesthetic and kind of recreation. Is that right, Dave?
Yeah, it's just, we have no parking ordinances, so usually at nighttime, the plowing isn't an issue, it's just vehicles, people parking there, and then it becomes one-lane roads. That's the concern that the people that live there have to deal with.
And most of these new homes have 3-car garages, so they have larger driveways for more cars to park in. I mean, I don't know how much on-street parking, when you drive through summer fields at night, I don't know how much, if any, on-street parking there is.
Well, I share the same concerns as you do, Mara. Because door knocking when there's one side and watching people when you're driving down a road and there's a sidewalk on one side, people will take the easy way of not going to that other side. So I like the aesthetic and for safety purposes of having sidewalks on both sides. I've driven down roads where people are parking on both sides for narrower roads, and then it becomes vehicles are getting bigger. Especially out in this area, people tend to not drive smaller vehicles. So if there's parking on both sides, people walking and vehicles trying to dodge each other, it becomes a safety issue. And even though we've done it for one neighborhood, for the entire city of Forest Lake, that doesn't necessarily justify continuing that. I am open-minded, but for me, I do like the aesthetic of going forward, having sidewalks on both sides.
I think a good example of the parking was even on 4th Street Northwest, people were trying to park on both sides there for a while where the carnival was. It just didn't work. You couldn't get one vehicle through there. And so then they weren't allowed any parking during that thing, but one side would have been fine in a normal situation, but when they're parked on both sides, there was barely room for one car to get through there.
How wide is that street?
And I don't know exactly, but it's got to be a 66-foot easement. You just can't have parking on both sides. That's all there is to it.
Yeah, and we're okay with doing the 30-foot road with the parking on the one side. I think that's a great solution.
Signs go up for that?
What's that?
Would signs go up for that?
Sure.
Just for frame of reference, 4th Street Northwest has, is about 36 feet back a curb, maybe 34. It's hard to tell with some tree coverage through there.
We've done, I mean, clearly, we've already, there's already precedent for doing that. It's hard to kind of like slippery slope. Once we've done it, it kind of starts to become community standard, which is, I think, is why we're all pausing and having a hard time with this particular question. I do think, though, it's also balanced off with, we want you to have a project that's workable, and it's important that we continue to have single family housing stock, or just housing lots available for building. So
So I would just, kind of reiterate that this is gonna be a quieter neighborhood. It's not gonna be downtown. I mean, my own street, we don't have sidewalks on either side of our street. And if we have cars parked on both sides, which is not uncommon, it's a one-lane road, and people are walking in the road to walk their dogs. And so, I mean, again, it's a quiet neighborhood. I think this is gonna be the same thing. So even having one sidewalk is a step up.
one of the reasons this was brought up during the MXR one is just to allow for, smaller lot sizes, allow, keep, single family homes affordable. We get that. It's, part of the reason why we made those changes, even though, the street size, wasn't part of that final consideration. It was kind of part of that part of the discussion. So it feels like maybe there's some openness. I would say maybe the sticking points, or maybe, the additional conversation at the staff level on kind of points 2 and 3. And, it seems like if we kind of come to resolution to 2 and 3, this question of interior road width, it feels like willingness to make it work. How's that for vague?
May I just at least note one thing for the record? When we look at the original PUD, there's one residential neighborhood to the north, one single-family residential neighborhood to the north of Headwaters. This is the last residential property that will be to the north of Headwaters in this location. When we look at our, our wetland map, we'll have our roadway coming through here. We'll have just a little bit more development, potentially this, but other than that, a lot of that other development along Headwaters is to the south. We're looking at that roadway design. All of the neighborhoods that were contemplated to the south of Headwaters Parkway do have wider roadways, sidewalks on both sides, more availability of parking. So I do think that if the council is favorable as we move forward with the development team, that we would really make solid findings of why we are making a concession with this PUD as opposed to other ones we have in the past, or future ones that sets this one apart from other parcels that are part of the Headwaters PUD.
Understood. Seems like primary points of follow-up would really be around at the staff level with questions 2 and 3. Does that seem like we've got some
Correct. The one
things to
thing I
consider?
wasn't clear on in clarifications, seemed like there was a discussion on sidewalks on both sides, if that's the direction we're supposed to go, even though it's a 30-foot street.
What is standard?
Well, unfortunately, the city hasn't had a standard. When we look at this neighborhood, we would not be able to get in a 30-foot street and the right-of-way with parking and sidewalk on both sides. the preliminary plat for the development contemplated, unfortunately, only pedestrian facilities on one side of each road. I do agree with council members who have expressed it's nice to have those pedestrian facilities on both sides. I love Old Forest Lake, right, where you just kind of walk in the street. If there is no sidewalk, it's really common. It's not as common in these newer neighborhoods, and I think we need to look at that standard going forward. But we have approved the preliminary plat with only on one side. If we want to see it on both sides, it's going to necessitate some roadway changes.
Hesitant to require more roadway changes to accommodate. The preliminary plat was on one side. There are a way for two to be possible. That'd be wonderful, but to require it, I think is probably beyond what anybody has appetite for.
How about if we do this north of Headwaters Parkway at the 30-foot with the one sidewalk, and you guys can assess it and tell us what we should do on the south side?
How about we talk about the south side when we start to plan for the south side?
Fine.
I appreciate it. Just one development project at a time. I just,
Don't want to negotiate it, here it is.
yeah.
Do we have some fair direction on some next steps, or at least the next conversation at staff level?
I
Thank
think
you.
so.
Sound
Thank you.
okay?
Thank you very much.
Thank you for being here this evening.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Appreciate it.
Y'all have a good night.
Do you want this, John?
Transition into staff updates. We'll start with Karen.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. I just wanted to remind council, you should have received an email from me earlier today about the Board of Appeals and Equalization meeting training. So the meeting is in April, usually, and the training begins now. So you'll have now until, I believe, it is the beginning of February to take that training. I think we have 2 council members who are trained for that. The county would like to see at least 2 members trained. By statute, we have to have at least 1. County prefers to have 2. So take that into consideration, and it's pretty easy. You just go online and you work through the modules that are online. The other thing I wanted to remind council is that the July 24th meeting is rescheduled to July 25th, Tuesday night, 7 p.m., July 25th. That's all I have.
Could you just do a quick check for those of us that are trained? Are we expiring and need to be retrained, or do we have extended? Do you know off the top of your head?
I don't know off the top of my head.
Could you-
I'll double check, I'll look at the list and see, and then I can email and let you know.
I have the list too, so it's 2024. I don't remember the month though.
Okay. Thank you. Abby.
I just have a couple quick things. I do want to give a shout out to one of our park rangers, Rick Banneman. He ended up becoming, by just some series of unfortunate events, the only park ranger on duty on the 4th of July. And in addition to helping try to keep up with some of the maintenance items, also with our our new concession stand, there was a lot of competing interests and things for him. And so he was there all day and really held out as best as he could all day. But I just really wanted to say he stepped up and continues to, as we're short-staffed with park rangers.
Much appreciated.
I wanted to also just note for the record, I did let the council know that we have reviewed 60% construction plans for Belts Park. We have been looking at those plans to help avoid any impacts or closures to the park for 2023. Initially, the plan set had talked about removing electrical and our warming house, but we're really hoping that we can keep those open through the 23-24 winter. But that first thing in the spring, we would take out that building and the electrical. I am going to note, though, that Public Works will be out. We don't have specific dates yet, and we will be trying to do our best with communication at removing some of the fencing, some bleachers in areas that will be disturbed in the spring. That work will be occurring probably within the next month while we have that seasonal help here to help us kind of just help remove some of those items from the park. And noted, we'll try to do public outreach as best as we can. We are with Dan not here, and he was kind of our communications person. We're really trying to figure out what that looks like, how we do that to let that neighborhood know. And then we have both of our planning commission meetings in July, you might have noticed, have been canceled. It isn't for a lack, it is a lack of agenda. We do have slow things trickling in. We have neighborhood meetings 2 different nights for a series of things. Full meeting agendas in August, like, did both of them cancel? All of a sudden I'm questioning, they just told you. Regardless, know that we have things coming up, but we've had a number of planning commission meetings canceled. Just wanted to let you know that at least that it's a little bit slower, but there's things still going on in the background.
Thank you, Abby. Yeah, please.
Question for, for Abby and staff. So Belts Park, since being on the council, that really hasn't come up. I'm just kind of curious if we're starting to remove stuff. What is there something approved and we're all in, or we're just maybe a update at some point on that, whether it's a call one-on-one, I don't know, but I'm just.
Sure, we can certainly provide an update at your next meeting or something. You did give the go-ahead for staff to move forward with the project. Initially, we talked about a 3-year project. We've really received quite a bit of outcry that would be an acceptable close at park for 3 years. So we're really looking at a very strong first phase, and that does remove some of the components in that first phase area. Happy to bring back, though, a presentation to you that outlines what that is. Yeah.
Patrick.
Just a couple of things. Ryan already mentioned our meeting with the state for Eureka, so that went well. We're happy to see that an early start, as early as we can. Was at the fireworks for the 4th. I thought our police, public works, and fire did a great job with as many people as there were down there. And it was mentioned about Dan's position. We are still looking at that position, how that's going to come out in the future, and we've just assigned different duties to different people for now to cover them and their work and mission and so forth. So, but we're aiming for, when we present the budget, to give you an idea of what that might look like as well.
Patrick. Amanda. All right, Dave.
Just to echo off Abby, Public Works will start removing the fence tomorrow, actually, at Belts. So that will get repurposed. We're working with Forest Lake Schools. We'll work on finding a baseball or softball field to put up the posts and the fence to make, a new baseball field somewhere else, or to actually enclose one in. So they'll all get repurposed. But since it's not raining and we got a bunch of kids, we're going to start pulling that out and make their time. So that will start tomorrow, and it's the fence along 11th, the fence along South Shore, and then that baseball field right at the corner of 11th and South Shore. So the backstop and bleachers.
So all of that fencing's coming out.
Yep.
There's taller fencing and then like waist high, right?
Yep, the 4-foot fence on the border. Well, the one between the property of that residence on the west side will stay. And then all the tennis courts and basketball courts, that's not part of this phase of construction. So it'll just be that 4-foot perimeter fence and that baseball field.
And the one, so there's 2 baseball fields there. One will remain open and consistent through all construction process.
I guess if stuff starts coming down fencing, social media is just going to blow up with questions and all that. So the sooner we can get some communication on that, it's going to serve us all better, I guess.
The other update, the state drought map on Thursday, we are in severe drought now. So if you don't remember, about 2 years ago, once we hit extreme, we have to put on a watering ban for our permit with the DNR. So we'll be monitoring that. It was about this time 2 years ago. I think it was the 25th or 26th of July when we had to put it on. If that happens, we will have to bring a resolution. We'll keep monitoring every Thursday they come out, so we'll just pray for rain and we don't have to do that. So I'll have.
Ryan.
Mayor, City Council, no additional updates unless you have any questions.
All right. Thank you, Ryan. Kevin.
No updates from finance.
All right, start with council updates. Councilmember.
Not really any updates, just I noticed the presence of the police department. They did a great job in public works throughout the 4th. It was great. We have another exciting week in Forest Lake, Town Ball Tour on Wednesday, boat races all weekend, and then a street dance Saturday night.
Councilmember Valento.
Nothing for me.
Councilmember Husnick.
Yeah, I attended the school board meeting that took place on June 29th, rather. And it was nothing real earth shattering. It just, they talked about it was our 113th year for the school district here in Forest Lake. That's a long time. And they also talked about the donations. They've, one donation was for over $14,000, another $10,000 one. Several other ones, it came to around $30,000 in donations for different things that have to be done. And they also talked about, there was some staff retirements, and they added all up, it was about 100 years worth of experience for the city, for the school. So, and they also talked about a resolution relating to a $20,035,000 general obligation facilities maintenance bond. So over a 10-year plan. I have for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Erickson.
No updates.
Just quick update, echo comments and thanks on to everyone's assistance and just a wonderful 4th of July week. I know it's a heavy lift for police, fire, public works, parks. Everyone's impacted, and I also really appreciate the Legion just always doing a great job coordinating a great event. Could have gone without the downpour during the parade, but I think everyone handled it well, and it was just a great week in Forest Lake. So also, as Councilmember Roberts mentioned, we have some exciting activities coming up as well, and so just really appreciate everyone's assistance in some great events. So that's the end of our planned agenda this evening. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor signal by saying aye. Aye. Oppose, and we're adjourned. Thank you, everyone. July 1st, so we're good. We're good. Okay.